But if you would rewind 18 months in Seth Stone's life, and he had been put in that pressure situation to lead, he would not have been able to do it. So Lieutenant Stone, who acted as an amazing leader, a heroic leader on that day, 18 months prior to this, he would not have been able to do it. And it's not because he wasn't brave. It's not because he wasn't smart. It's not because he didn't have the will. It's not because he wasn't determined. It's because he didn't have the skills yet to actually lead. Leadership is a skill. And a lot of people don't think of it this way. A lot of people think leadership is something you're born with. And it's something you just innately know how to do. Well, that's not true. Leadership is a skill, just like playing basketball is a skill, just like playing guitar is a skill, just like playing piano is a skill. Leadership is a skill, and there are strategies that you can use, and there are tactics that you can use as a leader. And it takes time to learn these skills. But all of us can become better leaders if we pay attention, to lessons that have been learned. And I want to talk you through some of the lessons that I learned throughout my career. And I'm going to start at the very beginning of my career. So I'm a brand new guy SEAL. I just showed up at the SEAL team. I'm in my first SEAL platoon. And when you're in a SEAL platoon, I know platoon sounds like a military thing. When you're in a platoon, it's like you're part of a gang. That's what it's like. And when you're a new guy in a gang, you know what you do? You keep your mouth shut. You keep your ears open. And that's exactly what we get told to do as young SEALs. Keep your mouth shut, keep your ears open. And we went through a pre-deployment training cycle where we're learning to operate together as a platoon. We're learning how to operate in the desert and in the jungle and in the mountains. We're learning to operate in a bunch of different environments. And as I'm going through all these different blocks of training, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing as a new guy, which is keep my mouth shut, keep my ears open. And as we continue through training, we start doing more advanced training and more advanced training. And finally, now we're starting to get to a point where we're getting ready to go on deployment, and we do our last block of training before we go on deployment. And the training is called gas oil platforms. GoPlats for short. And there's a picture of a gas oil platform right there, and the idea is that there's a bunch of these over in the Persian Gulf, and if bad guys were to take one of these things over, someone would have to take it back from them, and so we need to know how to do this. So we go off the coast of California where they have a bunch of gas oil platforms, and we go and practice doing this. So my platoon showed up to go start practicing clearing these big oil platforms. Now, as we're doing this, it's a very chaotic situation because on an oil platform, there's all kinds of junk and equipment and pipes everywhere, and there's a bunch of different levels, and the floor is made of grating, so you can actually see through the floor, and you can see through the ceiling, so there's threats everywhere. It's a very complex thing to do. And during one iteration of clearing this oil platform from the bottom to the top, on one of those iterations, my platoon, we got 16 guys in our platoon, we're going up a stairway. And as we go up this stairway, I'm probably the 5th or 6th guy in the back. And as we're going up this stairway, the first 2 guys get onto the level of the platform that we're clearing. And as these guys come up onto this platform level, they look out and it's a huge area. And there's equipment everywhere and there's pipes everywhere and they can't see everything, so they have to make a tactical call. Because they know they can't handle it themselves. In fact, what they decide is they need the whole platoon to come up there to help clear this entire platform. So they make a tactical call, and that tactical call is flood. And when we all hear that call, flood, everyone hears it, and so we all go up the ladder way. Guy goes left, next guy goes right, next guy goes left, next guy goes right, next guy goes left, that's me. and we all line up. And we got the ocean behind us and the stairwell behind us, and in front of us is this huge platform. And I'm standing there looking down my weapon, and I'm scanning for targets, and I'm trying to figure out what to do next, and I'm waiting for one of my leaders to make a decision. And as I'm waiting for one of my leaders to make a decision, 5 seconds goes by, 10 seconds go by, I'm scanning, I'm looking down the sights of my weapon, and no one's making a call. And 15 seconds go by, and 20 seconds go by, and that seems like an eternity for me right now. And finally, it's been 30 seconds, and no one has made a decision. So I decide, I better do something. So I high port my weapon, meaning I point it up at the sky, so I'm not looking down my sights anymore, and I take a step back, a 1 foot step back, and I look to my left and I look to my right. And when I do that, what I see is every other person in my platoon is staring down their weapons, including my platoon commander, including my platoon chief, including my platoon leading petty officer. They're all staring down their weapons, which means they can't see what to do next. But since I have taken a step back and I'm looking around, I can see exactly what we need to do. I know exactly what we need to do. I also know that I'm a new guy and I shouldn't say anything. So I summon up all the courage I can, and I say, hold left, clear right. And after I say that, I kind of brace for impact, because I figure I'm gonna get smacked. But that doesn't happen. Instead, they all pass the word, hold left, clear right, hold left, clear right. And the guys of us on the left hold, and the guys on the right start to clear, and it works. And we get that level cleared, and then we continue on with the rest of the clearance. We get to the helicopter platform on the top, which means we're done, and we get into a circle to debrief. And when we get in that circle to debrief, now I kind of brace for impact again, because I figure I'm definitely getting smacked now. But instead, my platoon chief says, hey, Jocko, good job on that level making the call. And I was pretty surprised by this. I was pretty surprised. And then I was a little bit worried. Because I thought to myself, wait a second. If I'm a new guy, and I'm the youngest guy, and I'm the most junior guy in this SEAL platoon, how is it that I was the one that figured out what to do? How did that happen? And I realized that it's because I took a step back. I detached. I looked around. I didn't get all absorbed in what was down my weapon. I moved my head and looked around. And when you take a step back and you look around, you can actually see what's happening. So I started to do this all the time in a bunch of different environments. I started to do it in a land warfare environment. When we get a gunfight, I'd pull back off the line and look around. In an urban environment, I'd do it. And then I started to do it when I had conversations with people. If I had talking to my platoon chief and I see that he's starting to get mad about something, instead of me starting to get mad too and escalating that situation, I would detach and say, oh, I see he's getting angry. How can I de-escalate this? And this, for me, became like a superpower. And this, for you, as a leader, can also become a superpower. If you can learn to detach from the chaos that's going on, detach from the mayhem, detach from the thing that's going on right in front of you that's trying to grab all your attention. And take a step back, and most important, detach from your own emotions. Because we do not make good decisions when we're emotional. So that's what we have to learn to do. Take a step back, detach, look around, breathe, and then figure out what you're gonna do next. That was the first thing that I learned in my first SEAL platoon. Now we went on deployment, and when I got back from that deployment, there was a core group of guys that stayed together from that first platoon. We rolled into our second platoon, and now we had a bunch of good guys, and we got some other people that came into our platoon that were also really good guys. We had an experienced platoon chief. We had an experienced leading petty officer. We had a guy named Grizz, Alton Lee Grizzard, who was the quarterback at the Naval Academy. Record-setting quarterback, just an incredible human being, incredible leader. So we had this really great platoon. Except for one guy. And it just so happened to be the leader, the platoon commander. And to sum up what his personality flaw was, let me tell you what I gave him for a nickname, Lieutenant Ego. Because his ego was the driving force behind everything. And this was a guy that you could see he was a little bit insecure. He didn't have much experience as a SEAL. So instead of saying, hey guys, I don't know how to do this, can you give me a hand? Instead, he would make believe like he knew, and he would impose his ideas and his plans upon us, and he wouldn't listen to anybody else. He would bark orders, he would yell. And it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. Because he wouldn't listen to anybody, his plans were bad, and then our platoons would go out and execute these plans, and they wouldn't go very well, so now we all look bad. And we'd try and say, hey, boss, we shouldn't do that. Hey, we're doing it my way or the highway. He absolutely thought that he was better than all of us. And it really impacted the way he fought. Okay. So it is what it is, and we're carrying on, and we're doing our best to mitigate the destruction that he's causing in our platoon. And then one night, he comes up with a plan for a training mission out in the desert, and it's a terrible plan. And finally, one of the young enlisted guys, one of the troopers, was like, hey, boss, this plan doesn't make any sense at all. And the boss yells at him, and he yells back, and it escalates, and they stand up and get in front of each other's faces, and all of a sudden, the platoon commander, Lieutenant Ego, takes a swing at one of his troops. So we jump in, we break it up, we get everyone calmed down to the best of our ability, we go out, we execute the operation. It doesn't go very well. But now these kind of rumblings that we had from the troops, now these rumblings, all of a sudden, they took a very serious turn. A very serious turn. And we started saying, listen, we don't want to work for this guy. We don't want to work for this guy. He doesn't listen to us. He's got a big ego. He's arrogant. We don't want to work for him. And so we banded together, and we had pretty much a mutiny. We had a mutiny. We went above him in the chain of command. We went to his boss. We requested a meeting with his boss, and then we all lined up in the commanding officer's office, and we all lined up and told him we don't want to work for this boss. He's arrogant, he doesn't listen, he's not a good tactician, we don't want to work for him. And our commanding officer, who was a very well-respected guy, he heard us out, and then he says, you know what this sounds like to me? Sounds like a mutiny. And we don't have mutinies in the Navy, and we're definitely not going to have a mutiny at my SEAL team. So you all, be quiet, deal with it, go get back to work. Fair enough. We went back to work, but like I said, our commanding officer was a good guy, and he started to pull the thread on the performance of the platoon and on the performance of Lieutenant Ego, and 3 days later, he fired him. Lieutenant Ego got fired. So what do we all think? We all think, yeah, we won, right? We won. We got rid of our boss who we didn't like. Awesome. And then we find out who's gonna come take his place. And the guy that is coming to take his place, I'll call him Lieutenant Charlie. Lieutenant Charlie was a legendary SEAL. Legendary SEAL, everybody knew who he was. He had combat experience. He had risen up through the ranks, all the way from the lowest SEAL, all the way now to becoming an officer, and now he's gonna be in charge of our platoon. Everybody knows who he is. He'd been an instructor in SEAL training. He'd been at the boat. He'd been stationed everywhere. He knew everything. He was a legendary guy. I'd never met him before, but we all knew his name. So we get told, okay, hey, tomorrow at lunch, you're gonna meet your new boss, Lieutenant Charlie. And we're like, oh, okay. But we're also like, uh-oh. Because I'm figuring they're sending Lieutenant Charlie to come and square these mutineers away and make sure this never happens again. So I'm sitting there, we're in our platoon space, it's like a little Quonset hut, and I'm looking at the pavement, and I'm waiting for him to come out. It's after lunch, and we're waiting for him to show up, and I'm looking out, and I don't see anyone, I don't see anyone, I don't see anyone. And finally, I see a guy turn the corner, he's walking towards us. And I think, well, that can't be him, because he's this like little guy. He's like 5'6", 5'5". He looks like he weighs about 140 pounds. And I'm thinking, well, that can't be a legendary SEAL right there. Who's this guy? But he keeps walking towards our platoon space. And as he gets a little closer, I realize that he's old. Like, he's one of the oldest people I'd ever seen. He looked like he was at least 36 or 37. So I'm saying, okay, well, this is definitely not him, you know. There's no way this old, skinny, small guy is gonna be this legendary SEAL. Well, sure enough, he comes up to the platoon space, opens the door and comes in and introduces himself. And what he says is, hey guys, sorry about what happened before with your old boss. I'm not worried about it. I'm just looking forward to working with all of you. And right there, I knew there was something different. He said, I'm looking forward to working with you guys. Not I'm the new boss, not I'm in charge, not you're my platoon. He said, I'm looking forward to working with you guys. So right out of the gate, I knew that this was a very different situation. And then later on that afternoon, 3 hours later, it's time to start getting our gear together so we can head home for the day, and I see Lieutenant Charlie, and he's carrying garbage out of our platoon space towards the dumpster. And this is a job in the SEAL teams, a lowly job. Not just so lowly that the new guys have to do it, but it's usually a new guy that's in trouble. And yet here we had this highly experienced, well-respected guy carrying out the garbage himself. Lieutenant Ego never would have done that in a million years. So again, I saw there was something different. And then the next day we come into work and we had a training mission that we were tasked to execute. And Lieutenant Charlie comes into the platoon space and he looks at me and he says, hey, Jocko, you're gonna run this mission today. You're gonna be in charge. And I was, again, shocked and at the same time overjoyed because I realized this guy was the exact opposite of Lieutenant Ego. Not only was he gonna listen to us, he was actually gonna give us ownership. He was gonna put us in charge of things. He was gonna let us run things. And of course, he'd give us guidance and he'd give us direction if we needed it. But he was gonna give us ownership. And that right there, seeing the contrast between this Lieutenant Ego and this Lieutenant Humble left an impression on me. We didn't want to work for or be around and certainly not follow Lieutenant Ego, but Lieutenant Charlie, we would follow anywhere and do anything for. And that's what I learned in my second platoon. You have to be humble. And now we get into our third platoon, come back, and now we get a new leadership inside the platoon. We still have a core group of guys, but as we have this core group of guys, we do get some new guys, but it's all good. We got a good solid platoon. And we do the same type of workup, preparing to go on deployment, and then we actually go on deployment. There's no war going on, so we're basically just doing a bunch of training. It's like 1995 or 1996 at this time. And we go out to the desert overseas, and we're doing some desert training, and we get out to do this desert training, and the type of desert training that we're doing is we're patrolling in the desert, and then we've got targets that pop up, and when the targets pop up, we react to the targets. And the way you do that, it's sort of like a football team running a play or a basketball team running a play. You have preconceived plays that you're gonna run, and we would rehearse these. By doing just that, we'd patrol along, the targets pop up, we react to those targets with our choreographed move. So that's what's going on. We're out there, we're patrolling, and the targets pop up. And the first thing we all do is get down low and we start shooting. And once we shoot a little bit, I immediately do what I talked about earlier. I detach, I take a step back, I look around. And I can see what we should do. I can see what choreographed play we should run. And that is, I see a ravine over there to the left. So I think, hey, there's a call, peel left. That's what we should do. And I give my platoon commander about a half a second to figure it out. And when he doesn't, I figure I'm gonna lead. And I say, peel left, and everybody passes the word, and we peel to the left. And as we peel to the left, we get into that ravine, we get away from the targets, we get into a little perimeter, and then we stop the drill to do a debrief. And as soon as we start the debrief, the platoon commander, the guy that's supposed to be making the calls, looks at me, and he says, hey, Jocko, why did you make that call? And I felt a little bit of ego wanting to answer that. You know, I wanted to say something like, well, sir, I had to do your job for you again. I wanted to say something like that, but I had learned about humility, and I just said, hey, boss, I kind of saw that there was a way to get out, and I made the call. Is that okay? And he said, well, actually, no. There was only one target that had popped up, and we've got 16 of us, and I figured we should actually assault through the target instead of running away. And at that point, I realized that there was something that I had missed from leadership, and that is alignment. That is making sure that a team is all moving towards the same common goal. You know, we wrote about in Extreme Ownership, the boat crew that's coming in last place over and over again. During boat crew races, you have to paddle these boats during Hell Week, and as you're paddling these boats, you're racing other boat crews, and this one boat crew was losing and losing and losing, and then they put a new leader in that boat crew, and the boat crew started to win. And people say, but what did he actually do? And this is a great metaphor for anything that you're doing. What he did was he got everyone in the boat to paddle at the same time in the same direction. And if you can do that, you're aligned and you can win. So we, as leaders, need to make sure that what we're doing is we're taking the whole team, and the whole team understands where it is we are going, and make sure we are all aligned and heading to the same place. Now, as I went through my first and second and third platoon, this whole time I had actually started doing a thing called jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu is quite popular now, but it wasn't very popular at the time. And I initially started to learn jiu-jitsu because I wanted to learn how to fight. But it didn't take me very long to realize that jiu-jitsu wasn't just a way of fighting. More important, it was a way of thinking. It was a whole attitude that you had to adopt if you wanted to do well in jiu-jitsu. And it all miraculously aligned with being in combat situations and being in leadership situations. So for instance, you gotta control your emotions. I already talked about that. You can't let your emotions get out of control. If you let your emotions get out of control, you're not gonna make good decisions. And by the way, if you're in a leadership position and you let your emotions get out of control, it's gonna make everybody on the team lose control of your emotions. With jiu-jitsu, you have to keep an open mind in order to learn. Everybody goes in, trust me, I'll give myself an example. When I'm a 21-year-old SEAL, fresh out of SEAL training, and I'm going in to learn how to fight, I already think I know how to fight. I think I can whip everybody. And in jiu-jitsu, next thing I know, 150-pound, 17-year-old kid is choking me out. I had to open up my mind. And not only that, you can see, I had to put my ego in check. Very humbling. Very humbling to do jujitsu. Another thing I learned about jujitsu is you don't attack your enemy's strengths. And it's the same thing on the battlefield. You don't attack your enemy's strengths. You can't do that. You have to attack them where they're weak, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. You fight how you train. That's very important to remember. And sometimes I talk to companies about training, and they think that training means, oh, I've got to stop my company for 4 days, I've got to hire instructors, and I've got to block out time, and I've got to put them through a curriculum, and that's all great. And we do that. But training, as a leader, training should happen every day, all day long with everybody that you work with. Everything that you do in life is an opportunity to train people around you. And if you train and prepare, then you'll be ready. Of course, you have to be balanced in jiu-jitsu, and you got to be balanced in life. And I wrote a book about it called The Dichotomy of Leadership. We as leaders have to stay balanced. If you're doing something to an extreme in one direction or another, it is not good. It is not good. We have to find a way to be balanced. And finally, and I mentioned this when it has to do with not attacking your enemy's strengths, but there's a whole strategy behind this. It's a strategy that's called the indirect approach. And what the indirect approach is instead of, like I said, attacking the enemy head on, where their defenses are, you move around to an area where they don't have any defense. In the military, this is called a flanking move. And there's a great example of it in the Civil War. The Confederate troops were on line, and the Union troops were 3/4 of a mile away. This was in the Battle of Chancellorsville. And General Lee told Stonewall Jackson, all right, Union troops are right there, go get them. And Stonewall Jackson said, sir, I don't want to go straight at them. General Lee says, what do you want to do? He says, I want to take my troops and march 14 miles around to the flank of the Union troops and hit them where they don't expect it. And they have a little discussion about it, and eventually Jackson convinces Lee to let him do it, and that's what he did. He marches 14 miles to get around to the flank of the Union troops. And they're able to quickly win that battle. But this doesn't only apply to combat. It applies to interacting with other people as well. Because if I've got a boss and my boss has a big ego, do I tell my boss, hey, I don't like your plan, it's not gonna work? What's that gonna do? That's his plan. He's gonna get defensive. I'm attacking a strong point. So instead, I say, hey, boss, I saw your plan, and I wanna make sure I fully understand why we're doing it this way, because I'm worried about maybe something happening over here. So I ask earnest questions instead of attacking my boss head on. And this is one of the hardest things to teach. And one of the reasons it's so hard to teach is that you all and me, we've all been brainwashed. We've been brainwashed our whole life, and here's how I know this is true, because what have you been taught is the shortest distance between 2 points? What is it? Straight line. Everyone's like, straight line. Yeah, y'all have been brainwashed. That's why it's so hard to convince people of this, because in leadership, guess what? If I got a problem with one of my subordinates and I go, hey, you really screwed this up, you did a terrible job. What does that do to their attitude? They're gonna get defensive. They're gonna probably go on the offense. So instead, if I say, hey, it looks like we got that project done late, can you tell me if there's anything that I could have done that would have made it easier for you to get it done on time? And all of a sudden, instead of me closing their mind by accusing them, I actually open their mind. And I know there's people in the audience right now, because of that brainwashing you've been through, but hey, Jocko, wouldn't it be easier just to say, tell them what's going on, be direct with them? That's like saying, oh, we're in a point here, and there's a mountain over there we want to get to, and in between it is a mountain and a river and another mountain and another river, and over here there's a nice pathway that goes there. Which way is going to be faster? The indirect route is going to be faster. So this is an important lesson that I learned. I learned it from jiu-jitsu, but I saw it on the battlefield, and I eventually saw how important it was when it came to interacting with other human beings. The shortest distance between 2 points is not always a straight line. In fact, most of the time, it is the indirect approach. This was proven out for me. When the war kicked off and I finally went into combat and led operations in Baghdad as a SEAL platoon commander, where we did night after night operations of going out and capturing or killing bad guys. I got done with that deployment. My next deployment, I was now in charge of 2 SEAL platoons. This was the Battle of Ramadi. This was a vicious battle. 2005, 2006 is when we were there. Incredibly tough combat, and incredible sacrifices were made during this battle. And that battle for me was a time that I put all these ideas to the test. And when I came back from this deployment, I took over the training for the West Coast SEAL teams. And I talked about this when I was here last year. What I realized when I took over the training for the West Coast SEAL teams is that the young leaders didn't really know how to lead. And I realized that I was the one that was gonna have to teach them how to lead. And so, after the first training mission that I watched the SEAL platoon do, which was a total disaster, I went back to my room that night in the barracks and I wrote down these 4 laws of combat leadership. Cover and move, which is teamwork, working together, mutually supporting each other. Keeping things simple. You have to keep things simple. And a lot of times people don't recognize the genius of simplicity until you work with someone that takes simple things and make them complex, right? You all know those types of people. It's horrible. So what we want to do is we want to be the person that makes things simple. The 3rd law of combat leadership, prioritize and execute. Look, you're going to have a lot of problems. Problems on the battlefield, problems in business, and yes, you're gonna have problems in life. And because of Murphy's Law, these problems are gonna hit you at the same time. You don't get one problem on Monday morning, and then another problem on Wednesday afternoon, and then another problem Friday morning before lunch. Problems don't come like that. They come all at the same time. And if you try and solve all your problems at the same time, you're not gonna solve any of them. So what you have to do is figure out what your biggest problem is, focus your efforts on that problem. Once you get that first biggest problem solved, you can move on to the next one, and so on down the line. And then finally, the 4th law of combat leadership is decentralized command. And decentralized command simply means everybody leads. Everybody on the team should be a leader. Everyone on the team should know what to do when things go wrong. And the way that you lead with decentralized command is you need to make sure that everyone on the team understands what the mission is, understands what the goal is, understands what the end state is, understands the parameters that they're allowed to work within. And most important, everyone on the team needs to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And if everyone has those ideas in their head, then everyone on your team can make decisions. And in order to make that happen, you have to empower the team to make decisions. And if you do this really, really well, what you end up with is a culture of decentralized command, where everybody understands what the mission, and every Everybody can lead. So that's our goal. Those are the 4 laws of combat leadership. And then there is, of course, this idea from the first book that I wrote about leadership, and this is the idea of extreme ownership, which means I'm not gonna blame anybody else or anything else. I'm gonna take ownership of problems and I'm gonna fix them. And I'll tell you what, this is a heavy weight to bear. And if you switch your mind into this mindset, I'm telling you, the first 2-3 days, the first 2-3 weeks, maybe even the first 2-3 months, it is gonna feel heavy on your soul. When you look at everything that's going on in your business, with your family, with your relationships, with your health, when you look at all that, and you put all that weight and all that responsibility on you, it is gonna feel heavy. But I'm gonna tell you something else too. You push through that initial weight, and you're gonna feel liberated. You're gonna feel free because you're gonna realize that all those problems that are going on in your life, you're the one that has the power to fix those problems. It is all on you. Now, as I continue to look at my career and look at my experience as a leader, I realized that some of the best operations that I was in charge of, both as a platoon commander and as a task unit commander, some of the best operations I was in charge of out there on the battlefield, I didn't say a single word. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to say anything. Everybody knew what their job was. Everyone knew what the mission was. When something sideways happened, people knew what to do to get it corrected. And I started to realize that my goal as a leader wasn't to be the traditional leader that we all think of. The traditional leader that we all think of is, the person that stands up in front of everyone and barks orders and yells and commands people and comes up with a plan and imposes that plan on people. That's what a lot of times we think of when we think of a leader. We think of that traditional leader. But I realized that the best operations I conducted and the best leaders I worked for were the ones that really didn't have to say anything. They were actually a silent leader. And in order to understand this a little bit, let's think about the communication spectrum that we work in as leaders. The lowest form of communication is nothing. I don't have to say anything. It's already happening. Somebody needs to pick up security on that door over there. I walk into the building and there's someone already on it. I don't need to say anything. Next, maybe I have to give a look. Maybe I gotta give a look to someone and give them a look like, the door? And people, oh yeah, cool. They pick up security on that door. So maybe I have to give them a look. Maybe I have to give them a little head nod. Maybe it's even a gesture. Maybe I gotta point at it. Maybe I even have to say a word. Right? Hey, Fred, door. Oh, cool, got it. Maybe I have to do that. Maybe I even have to say a sentence like, hey, Fred, get security on that door over there. And he's, oh, okay. Maybe I need to give him a detailed explanation. If I've really done a bad job as a leader, I need to say, hey, Fred, you see that door over there? If you don't pick up security on it and an enemy comes through there, we're all gonna die. Can you please go get security on that door? And he says, cool, got it, boss. And the worst of these is that I end up having to do it myself because Fred is too discombobulated and doesn't know what's happening, doesn't understand what the mission is, doesn't know why we're doing what we're doing, and I say, forget about it, and I have to go pick up security on this door. So there's like the spectrum of communication that we have to work with. And for me, where I wanna go and where I wanna be, and for me, the highest form of leadership is to be a silent leader, where I don't have to talk. I don't have to signal. I don't have to give a look. I don't have to do anything, and everything is happening. That should be our goal, and I'm gonna tell you, this is a goal you're likely not going to get to, right? There's always gonna be things that happen where you gotta step in and make things happen. Although sometimes it's our ego that wants to give direction, it's our ego that wants to stand up, it's our ego that wants to talk. Suppress that ego and let your subordinate leaders lead. And have that goal of being a silent leader. And once you've done a good job of becoming a silent leader, guess what? You don't need to be there anymore because you've created more leaders. And ultimately, as